We are back with another Wednesday sales video, and you know this means some cracking deals for all of you to pick up on your Xbox consoles. This week is mainly centered around indie games with some AAA sprinkled in here and there, but I do feel that Xbox are now holding back a bit for the upcoming Black Friday sales coming very soon. Do remember as well that I do give away a free Xbox game on these sales videos every single week. All you have to do is just leave a comment below and you're automatically entered. Congratulations to last week's winner, you won Chronos: The New Dawn. Just hit me up on our awesome Discord server and I will get that game right over to you. In some other great news though, I will be giving away another copy of Chronos, so make sure to enter down below. Now with that, let's dive back into the games that you need to grab in this week's sale. First up, we have Going Under, and this game actually centers around what happens when a startup culture literally becomes hell on earth. You play as an intern named Jackie, who is essentially fighting off demonic failures of tech companies that have gone wrong. With that, every weapon you use is your usual office junk, so stuff like staplers, keyboards, and even chairs can really cause some major carnage. It's a very fast, witty, and full of personality experience, with tons of dialogue that skewers Silicon Valley with a smile. It also knows exactly the type of parody that is providing companies and people, and it's a pretty hilarious experience from what I've played so far. It is sitting at a measly £3.19, and that price is ridiculously cheap for such a fantastic indie gem. You may remember, but I did mention King of Meat in a previous video about some new games releasing onto Xbox this week, and although the game has only just come out, it's already down by 75% for this week. This is essentially a roguelike brawler where everything is made of muscle and madness. It is so bloody fast and darkly funny, and it throws you into arenas that are filled with grotesque enemies and even stranger weapons, and of course it's inspired by a game show itself. The combat from what I've seen is pretty enjoyable and actually quite rewarding, and that's coming from a lot of reviews that I've checked out there. The art style is also very much comic sort of book inspired and similar to games like Big Helmet Heroes, which I reviewed earlier this year. Of course, there's a sort of tongue-in-cheek energy to all of this game, and I think that's why many people will actually be drawn to this one. At £6 is pretty much an insta-buy, and I do reckon it's this cheap due to Amazon actually wanting to leave the video game market, especially with the layoffs that did occur recently. I will say it right now, this next indie has never been on sale since the start of 2024, so this is now a perfect time to grab a Space For The Unbound if you've ever had it on your wishlist or for quite some time. This one actually takes you through an enchanting and whimsical story, and is ultimately a story about overcoming grief that's disguised as an innocent coming-of-age high school slice of life. The music, art direction, and overall atmosphere of this game though is something I can only describe as a nostalgic adolescence and yearning for the have been. You will definitely want to pay attention to the story and the voice lines here, as you need to take all of it in if you want to progress and complete all of the different puzzles, quests, and so much more. If you want a gorgeous looking indie with an incredibly sort of teary-eyed story, then this one is the one for you. Few games out there are really as divisive or as intriguing as Death Stranding, and the director's cut just adds even more to Kojima's strange yet compelling vision. As Sam Porter Bridges, you will be traversing haunting, windswept landscapes on a quest to reconnect isolated cities. Of course, it is part walking sim, but then it's part physics puzzle and part social experiment, as there's so many asynchronous online features that do make the world actually feel shared, even though there's a lot of solitude. There's new additions in this version as well, which include the likes of delivery tools, combat enhancements, and also expanded missions that sort of round out the entire experience. It was so great seeing this game finally being freed from the shackles of PlayStation for so long, and I fully expect this will also be the case for Death Stranding 2 in the near future. Currently though, this one is now 50% off, and I know it's always down to this sort of discount, but it's available for £17.50, and this really is the best version and the definitive way to explore one of gaming's most unique and meditative offerings. Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons still remains one of the most emotional adventures that I've ever played on Xbox, and the fact that it got remade with modern visuals is just incredible. To give you an idea of this game though, you essentially control two siblings simultaneously, one with each stick, and you're solving puzzles and surviving a world that feels equal parts sort of fairy tale and also tragedy. The remake doesn't just sharpen its textures either, it actually deepens the mood by adding lots of subtle lighting, atmosphere, and it just hits harder than I've ever seen before. There's no dialogue with this one either, as the game is really centered around pure visual storytelling that says more than words really ever could. It is a short game for sure, but it still lingers, and it's actually the first game by Joseph Fares, and he's the same dude who actually bought us Split Fiction and It Takes Two. At £6.39 after 60% off is a tiny price for such a timeless experience, and it really is a must play. If the first Ghostrunner was a lightning strike of speed and style, the sequel actually doubled down on that tenfold. Ghostrunner 2 actually pushes the cyberpunk aesthetic even further by adding stuff like motorcycle sequences, expanded combat options, and just even more vertical movement challenges for us to enjoy. The one-hit kill formula still remains here, demanding obviously your razor-sharp reflexes, but the brand new abilities which they brought to the table really allowed for such greater experimentation, and there's so much creativity now in how you tackle different enemies. The soundtrack obviously pulses with that synth energy, driving you to keep your momentum even through countless retries. It is a tough game for sure, but when you nail the sequence of wall runs, dashes and slashes, it feels so euphoric. Right now it's available for just £8.74, and it really absolutely nails that precise action and cyberpunk flair. From the creators of Mutant Year Zero comes Miasma Chronicles, and is essentially a tactical RPG set in a post-apocalyptic America, and is all smothered by a mysterious substance called the Miasma. You play as Elvis and his robotic brother as you're scavenging towns, uncovering secrets, and blasting mutants in tense turn-based combat. The world here, as you can see, is pretty striking. It's part ruined beauty, but part eerie quiet, and that sort of mix of stealth and tactics keeps every battle really intense. The writing's pretty witty as well, and the world building here is just so top notch, and the pacing is surprisingly cinematic and really engaging. It is a slower burn than your usual RPG, so do be aware of that, but it does reward your patience with a great story and so much strategy that just clicks perfectly. At £12 after 60% off, it's one of the best prices we've seen for Miasma Chronicles so far, and it really is a thoughtful take on the apocalypse that we've never seen before. There are 3 words that I can actually use to describe this next game, and it's peaceful, wordless, and enchanting. ABZU is an absolute indie masterclass, as it turned the ocean into a meditative dreamscape that we've never seen before. You're not fighting or racing like others out on the market, instead you're simply exploring and just swimming through coral forests and whale pods while the music swirls around you. It's all about movement and emotion, and using light and colour instead of dialogue to tell its story, and is very similar in its vein to Journey if you've ever played that experience. Every frame could really be a painting though, as every dive feels like a breath of calm. It is a short experience though, so do be aware, and it does sit around the couple of hours mark, but this one is just so completely unforgettable. At just under £6 with a 65% discount, is the best price so far, and it's a small masterpiece, and I feel this is always a game that many gamers need to try, as it really paints the medium in such a great way and gives us a sense of what game companies can really achieve when they try to make something absolutely beautiful. Gunfire Reborn was actually a really pleasant surprise for me when I stumbled across it on Xbox Game Pass, and it's still one of the games I actually dive into from time to time. It really is chaotic co-op perfection at its very best, and it's a roguelike FPS that actually mixes a cartoon stylization with some very hardcore shooting depth to it. You and your friends essentially pick from quirky animal heroes, and each of them are armed with unique powers, and then you dive into procedurally generated dungeons full of enemies, loot, and also chaos. The gunplay feels crisp and the pace gets rather relentless, although there are a few server problems from time to time. In that case though, it still becomes endlessly replayable as well thanks to the smart upgrade system, and also all of the random weapon drops that do really change everything around you. Solo or with 3 friends, it's just impossible not to have fun with that one, and with it being just under £9, it's well worth grabbing, as it's one of the most energetic indie shooters out on the market. One game I wanted to recommend this week is actually one that I've never heard of until making this video, and it's called Book of Demons. This one's actually part hack and slash, part deck builder, and entirely charming, and it was actually recommended to me by a couple of people over on our Discord server. Upon doing some more digging and seeing some fantastic reviews about it, this one essentially takes the classic Diablo formula and then reshapes it into something accessible and very clever. You essentially have to crawl through papercraft dungeons and then battle monsters by playing cards, and these cards actually act as spells and weapons. The tone is surprisingly light-hearted though, but the art style is where it really stands out, as it's pretty incredible and the gameplay is surprisingly deep. You can customize every single dungeon's length, tweak the difficulty, and then just chase loot in an endlessly satisfying loop. For £2 at a whopping 90% off, it's just such an incredible hiccup for this week. I've already added it to my own personal backlog, and I'm really intrigued to see how it plays. Underworld Ascendant is a game that really has tried something different, as it's essentially a sandbox RPG that's entirely built on player freedom. You're basically dropped into the Abyss, which is a living labyrinth full of traps, monsters, and puzzles, and they can be solved in just countless ways, however you choose. The game lets you do stuff like sneak past enemies, stack crates into bridges, or just set entire rooms on fire if you want. The catch is though, is that it watches you every single time to see how it works out, but then it throws some spanners into the works to make your job even harder. It's certainly a little bit rough around the edges though, so do be warned, but the ambition just shines through and that's why I'm recommending it. Fans of immersive sims though, like Ultimate Underworld or Arx Fatalis, will feel right at home in this one, as it's just so much experimental chaos that's a lovely 75% off for this week. Stray Blade is such a colourful yet cruel Souls-like with an identity of its very own. You're essentially an adventurer brought back from death, exploring a vibrant world where every ruin hides both beauty and also danger. Combat is quite fast and deliberate, with loads of parries, dodges and split-second strikes that feel tight and responsive, and to be honest, I kind of expect that these days with any Souls-like, so it's not really brand new here. Although your companion Boji does add lots of charm and lore to the game, and it kind of makes it more than just another dark fantasy game, which I was kind of expecting. It's not as punishing as games like Dark Souls or even Elden Ring, but it's equally rewarding when you do master its controls. £8 after 50% off is such a steal for something this slick, and it does actually prove that you can be a bright and brutal sort of Souls-like game and be beautiful at all times. Bloodstained Ritual of the Night is a fantastic entry within the Metroidvania genre, and it was actually developed by the mastermind behind Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Of course, this game looks to combine exploration, platforming and RPG mechanics in a way that still feels rather familiar to fans of classic 2D side-scrollers. In Bloodstained though, you play as Miriam, a woman that's cursed with demonic powers, on a mission to battle her way through a hellish castle that's full of loads of nightmarish creatures. The game of course is packed with loads of secrets for you to uncover, weapons to collect and bosses that will push your skills to the very limits. With its stunning 2.5D visuals, tight controls and an atmospheric soundtrack, this game is a must play. At 75% off, bringing the price down to just £8.74, this is easily one of the best deals in this week's sale. I feel that sometimes all we want is a bargain with all the DLC included, and something that you can easily spend multiple hours playing upon diving into it. Well, PayDay 2 Crime Wave Edition delivers that in bags, and I have to say, is one of those titles that really hits you with that addictive replay value. Many of you already know what this game entails, but to give you a very brief overview, essentially you and your crew must pull off some elaborate heists by any means necessary. It includes a lot of teamwork, adrenaline and gunfire, all wrapped up into one endless loop of just one more job. With the awful and still frankly dreadful gameplay of PayDay 3, this is easily one of the best within the franchise, and that's why so many people are still diving into it. £4 for this much multiplayer madness is a no-brainer, so grab your mask, load that drill, and remember, don't get caught. So what game are you going to pick up in this week's sale? You'll have to let me know down below, and obviously that does enter you in with a chance to win Chronos: The New Dawn. Do like this video if you enjoyed it and want to see more sales videos like this, and subscribe for more Xbox content every single day. Whilst here though, and if you want to check out one of my other Xbox videos, why don't you check the one out on screen now, as I recently covered all of the Xbox Game Pass announcements for Wave 1 of November.